Hi everyone, it's Liz here, and I'm so excited to bring you today's stitch tutorial, which is this pretty feathers pattern. This is a free pattern by Annie's, and you can get it by clicking the link in the description and downloading this printable PDF. For today's video, we're going to be using a number 4 worsted weight acrylic yarn and a number 5 millimeter hook. You'll also need a pair of scissors. Now let's get started. You're going to begin with a chain in multiples of 12 plus 2 for the starting chain. So here I did 36, which is a multiple of 12 plus 2, so for 38 total. For row 1, we're going to start by working a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So that's the first and that's the second. And just work a single crochet in there. Then I'm going to chain 2 and skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and work a V-stitch in the next chain. So for this pattern, a V-stitch is a double crochet, chain 2, and a double crochet. We're going to chain 2 again, skip 2 chains, and single crochet. Chain 2 again, skip 2 chains, and work your V-stitch. So for this pattern, the V-stitch is double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, but make sure you check your pattern because sometimes they are different. They might have only 1 chain in the center, or they might be made out of trebles. Just check the definitions. And I'm just going to repeat this sequence all the way across, which is a V-stitch, chain 2, skip 2 chains, and a single crochet. When you get to the last 3 chains, you're going to skip 2 and then work a single crochet in the very last chain. And that's it for row 1. Row 2 is going to begin with a chain of 4, and that is going to count as a treble stitch. So we're starting with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn your work, and then work a cluster into the next V-stitch, which is this V-stitch right here. So to work the cluster, we're going to start out like we would a double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook right into that chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2 more loops. So rather than finishing the crochet, we're going to work another, finishing the stitch, we're going to work another double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through 2. So we've basically made the first part of a double crochet. And then once you have these 3 loops on your hook, you just yarn over and pull through all 3. And that's your cluster, which is basically a double crochet 2 together or a double crochet decrease. Then we're going to chain 1 and work another cluster. Chain 1 and work another cluster, which is the start of a double crochet. Leave those loops on the hook, start another double crochet, and then pull through all 3. So we've worked 3 clusters into that first chain 2 space of the V-stitch of the previous row. Chain 1, we're going to skip this chain 2 space, this single crochet, and this chain 2 space, and work another set of 3 clusters. So that's 1 cluster, chain 1, 2 clusters, chain one, and then work my third cluster. And the same rule for the clusters. They are defined differently in different patterns, so you want to make sure that you know which cluster you should be making for which pattern you're working on. So we're skipping these stitches here, and then we're working another cluster right into that V-stitch. And then we're just going to repeat this all the way across. So cluster, chain one, cluster, chain one, and cluster in each of these V-stitches. When you get to the very last V-stitch, you're going to work one cluster, chain one, another cluster, chain one, and your last cluster into that last V-stitch. Now don't chain one again at this point. Just finish off the third cluster, and then you're going to work a treble into the last stitch. And that's actually this single crochet, which is down here, because this is a chain two, so we're not doing anything in there. We're just going to work a treble into this single crochet. So a treble is going to be 2 yarn overs, and then insert your hook into the single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And that's row 2. Now row 3 is going to start with a chain 1, turn your work, work a single crochet into that very same stitch. And now we're going to chain 1 again and single crochet into the next chain space. So there's no chain space here. The next one is here between the first 2 clusters. Single crochet there, chain 1, work a single crochet in the next chain space, which is right here between the next 2 clusters. Chain 1, and now a single crochet here between the groups of clusters. And then we're just going to repeat that all the way across. It's just a chain 1 and work single crochets in the chain spaces. So we're skipping the clusters and we're working only into the chain spaces and chaining 1 in between. And when you get to the end of the row, you're going to chain 1, skip the last cluster, and then work your last single crochet into the top of the turning chain of the previous row. So just go right into there with a single crochet. And that's row 3. On to row 4. Row 4 begins with a chain of 3. 1, 2, and 3. And of course that counts as our first double crochet of the row. Turn your work and work a double crochet into the very next chain space, which is right here at the beginning. So double crochet, and we're going to separate these with a chain 1 again. So chain 1 and double crochet in the next chain space. Chain 1 and double crochet in the next chain space. So we're skipping the single crochets and working double crochets into the chain spaces. And just do that all the way across. Make sure you're going into the chain spaces and not into the single crochets. Because if you do, then your count will be off and you won't be able to do the next row, which is to start the V-stitches again. So just repeat this all the way across. So at the end of the row, you've got your last double crochet in the last chain space, and then your very last double crochet is going to be into the single crochet. And that's row 4. Now for row 5, we're going to start working some V-stitches again. So we're going to start with a chain 1, turn your work, and work a single crochet into the first double crochet. That's right there. And then chain 2, skip the next double crochet, and then V-stitch in the next double crochet. So we're skipping this stitch, we're skipping the chain space, and we're working the V-stitch right into the top of the double crochet. So that's a double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet for your V-stitch. Now we chain 2 again, and we skip another double crochet, but the next stitch is going to be worked into the chain space. So we're skipping this double crochet and working a single crochet right into that chain space. Chain 2 again, skip the double crochet, and work the next V-stitch into the top of the double crochet. So the V-stitches are going into the tops of the double crochets of the previous row, and the single crochets are going into the chain spaces of the previous row, and you're skipping a whole double crochet in between. And that's very important, just like the previous row, because you don't want your count to be off. But you have to remember to alternate with your single crochets in the chain spaces and your V-stitches in the double crochets. Skip this one, work my V-stitch, chain 2, skip this double crochet, work my single crochet in the chain space. Chain 2, skip a double crochet, V-stitch into the top of the double crochet, chain 2, skip a double crochet and a single crochet in the chain 1 space. Skip a double crochet, V-stitch, and you should end with these stitches left here. So you're going to skip this last double crochet and then work your last single crochet into the top of the turning chain. And that was round 5. Now we're actually going to repeat row 5. Now we're going to repeat rows 2 through 5 for the pattern. So I'm going to show you row 2 again. And that starts with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're just going to start with those clusters again. So here's my first chain space. And I start with a cluster. Chain 1, cluster again. Chain 1 and cluster. Chain 1, cluster, chain 1 and cluster. Chain 1 and cluster with a chain 1 between. We're skipping these stitches here, and we're only worried about working into those V-stitches. 2 and 3. So you get the idea. This row is the same as this row. So you're just going to repeat rows 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you start back again at row 2, and that is the entire pattern. And you can start out with, of course, as many stitches as you want and just keep going and going. This would make a really pretty blanket. And just remember to start with a multiple of 12 with 2 chains for your starting chain. Remember, you can download this free pattern right on the link in the description, and make sure you like and subscribe to Annie's YouTube channel and come back for more crochet tutorials. Thanks for joining. Bye.